Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR leaders. Today we have a very special guest, a man that needs no introduction. We're lucky enough to be joined by Professor Dave Ulrich. Dave, how are you?
Chris, what a privilege to be with you. Thanks so much for your time.
You too. Dave, for the few members that aren't aware of who you are, give them a brief overview and sort of fill in the gaps. Tell them a little bit more about yourself.
I'm an old guy who's been around HR a long time. Title-wise, I'm a professor at the University of Michigan in the United States. I have been there for over 30 years. I don't spend a lot of time there. I do executive programs at Michigan. And then I spend my time thinking and writing about what HR can and should do to be effective in the future. My real passion, I was at a meeting with professors from universities a year ago and did a talk, and I introduced myself by saying, elephants eat grass, and then they process grass, and then they pass grass. And all of the professors said, what are you talking about in this academic setting? And I said, most of the academics I'm with study the grass the elephants have passed. Dead silence. And they said, did you just say that? And I said, yes, wear gloves. What I'm passionate about, and I'm not here to beat on academics, what I'm passionate about is planting the grass the elephants will eat next year. So my big passion in HR and other areas is what's next? What are the agendas and the grass, if you will, the content that HR should pay attention to as we look to our future? And that's the issue I'm most passionate about.
Fantastic. And just starting from the beginning, this is a question I've always wanted to ask you. What really compelled you to pursue a career in the field of HR?
I'm not sure my career was intentionality as much as stumbled into it. A quick anecdote. I was on my way to law school decades ago. Somebody advised me to take a course in organizational behavior, or OB, as it was known. I got enraptured. Professor Bonner Ritchie, it was one of those teachers who was insightful, charismatic. He got me to look at organizations where I work, where I worship, where I eat, where I travel. And he said, the organization shapes the world you live in. People don't think, organizations shape how people think. And he just captured me. And in fact, as a professor, he said, there is nothing required in this course. You have to show me what you've learned about organizations. I was an English major, and so I would read Paradise Lost, and I would look at Beelzebub and his organization of purgatory, of hell. And I wrote a paper for English, the organizational implications of Paradise Lost. And I turned it in. I cheated. I turned it into English, and I turned it into Bonner's class. He loved it. The English professor said, this is weird. And so I changed from a law degree to organizational behavior. I called my parents, and I said to my mom and my dad, I said, I'm going to major in OB, not law school. And they thought,
how'd they take it?
Well, they were delighted because they thought it was obstetrics, and that I was going to become a doctor. And I said, no, it's not obstetrics. It's this new field called OB, organizational behavior. And they said, what is it? And I said, Mom and Dad, I have no clue, but I think I can do this. I just passionate. And my wife eventually, who's a very good psychologist, said I have a form of OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. But she said, your OCD is organization compulsive disorder. I wake up, I think about organizations, I live organizations. I'm still horrible to go to dinner with. It's not unknown even today that I will call the maitre d' over and the owner of the restaurant to say, I think I can improve your efficiency 10%. Let me give you some counsel. And I generally don't get good responses. Sometimes my family doesn't want to travel with me because I've given advice to car agencies and airlines and hotels, and they say, Dad, cool it, put off your OCD hat. This is the area I'm passionate about. And HR becomes, I'm not a traditional kind of HR policy person. In fact, I'm probably not very good at that, but I am interested in building organizations that help people and customers fulfill their potential and win. And HR becomes the infrastructure for doing it.
Fantastic. Well, look, without that passion, you wouldn't be where you are all this many years later. So it's fantastic. On that point, you've I believe it's been 25 years your career the span? Is that correct
Probably,
to say?
probably 30 years.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
I'm so much older than you are, Chris. It just makes people frightened. Yeah,
No.
long time.
Okay. Well, look. At this point in your career, what would you say is your area of expertise?
I got asked by a friend yesterday. He said, "Tell me the two or three things you're passionate about and that you know." I'm going to boil it down to one. I'm interested in how to create value. And the logic of value is it's not what you do, it's what somebody gets from what you do. So I'm really interested in the concept of how do we create value through organizations? How does an organization help the employees be more productive, find meaning, find purpose in their lives? How do they have the buzzword today is experience? How do we create value through the organization we're a part of for our customers? How do they get products and services that make their lives better? How do we create value through the organization we're a part of for our investors, for our communities? And so I see these stakeholders inside the organization, the employees, the organization itself, and outside customers, investors, communities. And then how do we build an organization that delivers value to those multiple stakeholders? And inside that organization, I see three things. I have focused on talent, people. I focused on the organization itself, the culture, the capabilities, and I think the intersection between people and systems is leadership. So I've really said, how do we build talent, leadership, and culture so that people outside, customers, investors, communities, and inside the employees get value from their experience with that organization? That just came off as so complex. I'm so sorry. But
Okay,
but that's
that's
what I'm
complete.
after.
No, that's completely fine. So, when you mention stakeholders, what conversations should HR leaders be having with internal stakeholders or internal and external stakeholders?
I think one of the questions I often ask when I teach is, what's the biggest challenge in your job today as an HR professional? And I get issues like building credibility, doing training, building employee experience. And I say, we're wrong. We've got to do that so that. And the so that is where the conversation starts. So that employees are more productive, have a better experience at work. We do HR so that customers buy our product, so that investors have confidence in it. So where I love HR conversations to start is not about HR. In the last book I did, the first line that we had was, HR is not about HR. It's about the business. And so I think the HR conversation begins with, what's the business issue we're wrestling with? And let me give a quick anecdote. We run a consortium program where companies send teams of 5, and we do 11 days trying to train HR professionals to get really good at this work we do. And one of the really talented persons went back to his home country. I won't name it. And he said, Dave, I went back and I surveyed my business leaders and I got no effect. And I said, oh my goodness, I failed you. And I said, what'd you do? He said, well, I listed 15 HR programs and I asked them which ones we should focus on: career banding, succession planning, new performance appraisal, executive training. And I didn't get any insight. And I said, you goofed. You don't go to business leaders and ask them which HR programs to do. You go to business leaders and ask them, what are the challenges they're wrestling with? Is it managing costs? Is it innovation? Is it customer service? Is it stock price? And I said to him, you've been through my 11-day program and I failed you, because the goal of HR is not to get business leaders to want to do HR. It's to get them to want to win in their business. And then we bring the HR wisdom and insight to help them accomplish their goals. I think that's the direction HR should head. It's not questions about what HR should do. It's questions about what the business needs to win.
Hmm. So that being said, how can HR leaders best add value to their businesses then?
I think once we know what the business goal is, for example, in this case, they were in a mineral business, a natural resource business, and the business goal was to manage cost. And sometimes
Okay.
that's a legitimate issue. Then I think there's three things we in HR bring, and it's what I started with: talent, leadership, and culture. What can we do to help you manage talent, to manage leadership, and to manage the culture and organization in order to get your costs reduced? By the way, I love those three things. For me, it's such an easy topology. And in another business, the issue is innovation. We want to innovate. We want to get new products and services out faster to customers. What are the talent, leadership, and organizational implications? In another business, we want to become a more global distributor in emerging markets. What are the talent? What are the leadership? What are the organizational implications? And I think if HR can organize its outcomes around talent, leadership, and culture to deliver business results, then we get a channel that seems to work.
Fantastic, fantastic. And looking to the future, I know that HR, especially from when I've been in this industry for 10 years, and the skill set of a HR leader has completely changed. I'm sure you'd agree on that.
What would you
Or
see,
the requirements.
Chris? What would you see as some of the emerging skills of HR? It's fun for me to get to interview you. You have, by the way,
No pressure.
well, no pressure on you or me, but you have an incredible background in this field, and you're thoughtful and you're observant. What do you see about those emerging skills?
I think the change really. I think there's two areas. I think one, HR needs to know not just in HR looking inwards. It's about understanding the business. If you're a HR leader and you don't understand how your business runs and operates outside of the HR function, then you're going to have a very tough time being able to
I
help the
totally
company
agree.
deliver on its
Great,
objectives.
great comment.
And I think the other side is, which is more recent, is around technology. And this is a big challenge for a lot of people that I'm speaking to on a daily basis. And I think we're only at the beginning of how technology is going to impact HR and the workforce, and how we can utilize data to make better decisions. And that, as you know, that's not a traditional, something which is traditionally HR. Especially for people that have been in the industry for a long time, this is very new to them. And also, there's so much information out there. It's a minefield in terms of understanding where HR is going to be going in the next, say, 5 to 10 years. So I think those are the two things. It's the technology element to it, but it's also the business acumen and making sure that HR, if you're a HR leader, that you understand the wider business and how it runs and operates, and the P&L of the business, essentially.
By the way, let me amen both of those and maybe add a couple that we found. So, totally agree. I think the business one has been around. We used to call it know the business. We now talk about being a strategic positioner. And our research shows that once you get invited to the meeting, and that's the credible activist skill set, you got to be credible, you got to be trusted. I want Chris in my meeting because I trust that he'll help me do my job better. Then when you're in that dialogue, or that symbolic at the table, what is it you talk about? And that's the strategic position or business. And what you said, I thought, was really helpful, because it's not just business literacy. It's not just I can read an income statement, a balance sheet, I know the language of business. I think you've also got to know, how does my business make money? I mean, businesses are in the business of money. You've also got to know, who are those key stakeholders who will determine my future money? So who are the customers, the investors, the competitors? And third, I think you got to know, to be a real strategic partner, or we call it strategic positioner, what are the trends that will shape my business in the future? For example, the technology trend of robots, how will that shape manufacturing? I had to be aware of that. Now, the second thing you raise is technology, which is key. We have found, again, phases of that. Everybody's gaga. It's I've been around the business long enough, and so have you, that there seems to be in HR an obsession with shiny new objects. And and we love them. And the latest one is technology. And I agree with shiny new objects, but I think we need to put them in context. I think right now we're seeing technology to build HR efficiency and HR innovation in some of our existing practices. So when I see technology, we're using LinkedIn to hire people. We're using robots to replace service centers. We're using e-learning and podcasts like we're doing now to do things more efficiently and to be innovative. TED Talks is a form of information sharing. But I think the next generation of technology is going to be beyond innovation and efficiency in what we do, to really providing information to the company. And so how do we use information in a more rigorous way? We found, for example, and I know I'm talking too much and too fast here, we found that everybody in HR, another shiny object is analytics. Everybody wants to do analytics. And what we found is HR people who do analytics are not having business impact. And we got that from a big data set, 32,000 people around the world. And it bothered me because I love analytics. My PhD in this organizational compulsive world is in statistics and taxonomy. And so I love data. And what we found was that most HR people are doing analytics on HR. And good analytics does not start with the HR question. It starts with the business question. And so the issue is not about analytics. It's what information do we need to have a business impact? And what's the information we need so that we in retail can better give customers a great experience, that we in automotive can give customers the experience of the driverless car? What information do we need? And technology should enable that information. And then I'm going to go to the next step. So I think we've got a phase around technology making what we do better now, to technology enabling information, which is the backbone of analytics, to the next step of technology, which we don't yet have, and it's around connection and relationships. Today, we find boy, you hit a button, and I'm just blabbing on and on here, but
no, keep going.
Some folks in psychology have done research. What is the leading cause of mortality, death? Is it smoking? Is it drinking? Is it obesity? Is it depression and anxiety? Or is it social isolation? And it's social isolation. When people are socially isolated from each other, a lot of bad things then follow, and it leads to death. One of my colleagues asked me a question. So, Dave, what's the cause and what's the effect? And I said, but to my friend, death is the outcome. I mean, it's hard to make that the cause unless you're into religion and what happens to social isolation after. But and I think a lot of technology today is isolating us. It's separating us. It's moving away from each other. In the U.S., and I don't know the data in the U.K. that you might know, the millennials are spending 6 to 7 hours a day in front of a screen. And it's isolating people. So my question is, how do we use technology to build connection and experience among people? And it's not just how many likes I get on a post. It's not 140 character tweets. Yeah, it's and how do we use technology to really build deeper bonds and relationships? Those are the two questions I'm really interested in with that elephant grass story. How do we use technology to identify the right information and to build a better connection?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because that was something which was on my mind when I was looking at the different technology platforms we could use as a business. And one of our most successful networking and benchmarking platforms is our virtual platform that we have. So every month we host a virtual workshop where one of our HR practitioners leads a 1-hour session, and we have HR leaders logging in from all over the world. And rather than it being a webinar, we've actually opened it up to be completely interactive. So we have between 50 and 100 people all online. They can all speak with each other. It's fully interactive. And we found that actually now has been one of our biggest draws for HRD leaders, because it allows people to log on from all over the world, from anywhere, on any device, and actually network and benchmark and learn with their peers. Not just watch a isolated video in their office, i.e. a webinar, where there's no real engagement. So I can definitely speak to that's something that we found that very, very much works and uses technology in a way to build an active community and not an isolated community.
You know, we have in our consulting, we've started what we call the RBL Institute, where firms pay a membership, and we have what we call the exact same thing. We've been doing what we call mini forums once a month. What we have found is we keep them to 1 hour. So these are not, they don't linger longer. And anyone can sign in. We also find it really helpful to keep it to very small numbers, to even 5 to 10 people. And then we facilitate a very specific topic. How do you retain people in China in a changing market? And there aren't tons of people, but there are 5 to 10 people. And we call them mini forums. I can't remember the word you used, but
virtual roundtables. Virtual roundtables. Same thing, pretty much what you're saying.
And it's really been powerful. I am really worried in our HR field that, and I've run into it because I do presentations and you've run conferences. We're in what's the word when you give people too many drugs? We're inuring people. We're getting people to assume that a good talk is a TED talk. And I mean, I think TED Talks are a great channel of idea distribution, but they aren't very engaging. I mean, these are
No. Yeah.
in my generation, and you won't be old enough to remember, presenters used to carry their 35 millimeter slides around with them, and they'd say, "Oh, I'm here to present to you. Turn the lights off, and we're going to run through the slides." Well, that's a TED Talk, and they're brilliant. They're beautifully crafted. They're a performance. I pay to go to see a Shakespeare play, but they're not connecting people. They're not even connecting people to the ideas. They're just putting the ideas out there in a brilliant way. Now, I think TED Talks have a place, and maybe it's because I don't get invited to do TED Talks and I'm not very good at it. I want to engage people in solving problems, and it sounds like that's what you're doing as well.
Yeah, I think they're now seen as completely different formats and different mediums.
Yep.
Completely.
Yep.
I always watch TED Talks on the way to work. Sometimes I listen to podcasts on the way to work, but it's not a way for me to engage with people. It's a way to consume content in a very time efficient, effective manner, and that's why those platforms are huge. It's why TED Talk is where it is right now, because it allows people to gain access to that content in a very easy manner, and everyone's attention's on mobile, so it's very easy to consume that way. Whereas, unfortunately, when people think of the interactive element, which we're talking about now, it normally is quite time consuming. So I'm really happy that you're doing the 1 hour sessions as we are, and focusing on a very specific HR topic, but allowing that open conversation at the same time, because I believe that's you're meeting in the middle there.
I'm
you
trying.
still have the interactive element, but then you also have the content in a very easy to digest, time effective manner. So it's about finding that balance.
And I think it's and now you talked about HR skills. So you talked about technology skills, strategic positioner skills. You just identified the next skill that we found most critical, and it's navigating paradox. Paradox means there's not one answer. There's multiple questions and multiple pathways. For impacting HR, you just talked about it. We do need podcasts. I hope this podcast is helpful to those listening. I hope TED Talks are helpful. But it's not one answer. There's multiple channels, and that's the issue of paradox. Should we be more diverse? In some companies, yes. And in some companies, we need to be more focused. So there's a tension between divergence and convergence. Should we be more employee-centric or customer-centric? Both. Should we be more top-down or bottom-up? Both. Should we focus on our past or our future? Both. And what we found is the best HR folks seem to navigate those inherent tensions in any organization. And by navigating, you don't manage the paradox. You don't fix it. But you live in that world of ambiguity and tension that allows you to go forward with progress.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. That really led me on perfectly to my question, because one of the questions I really wanted to ask you was in your experience. You know, you've spoken with thousands of HR leaders all over the world, but what have you identified to be the top competencies that successful HR leaders possess?
Well, and again, this is based on big research as well as experience. We saw three things that we found in our latest research. One, you got to be credible and build a relationship of trust to get invited to the discussion. So if I want to work with somebody, I've got to know I can trust them, and we call it credible activists too. You got to be a strategic positioner, which is what we just talked about that you raised so brilliantly. And three, you got to navigate that paradox. Those are the three skill sets that allow you to be successful. Credible activists get you in the room. Strategic positioner serves the right stakeholders, and navigating paradox, we found, has the highest business impact.
Fantastic. Well, look, that leads us very nicely on to our quickfire round. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no more than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Got it.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a leader in the field of HR?
Thinking outside the box and taking enormous personal and professional risk, asking questions people didn't have answers to, and being willing to live in a state of ambiguity.
Fantastic. What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
It's not about who you are and what you do. It's about the value you create for somebody else. Don't start with your leadership authenticity. That's narcissism. Start with the people you serve and how what you know can help them be successful.
Fantastic. What's one book that you'd recommend to our audience, and why? And we can include your ones as well.
You're going to get an answer that I think may be socially irresponsible and dangerous. But if I were to go to
on the edge.
I'm going to live on the edge, and I'm going to get criticized as well as lauded. I think the Bible has lived the case of time. In the Old Testament, we have stories of people's relationship with the divine. In the New Testament, and this is Christianity, but it's Muslim, it's Judaism, Hindus as well. I think good principles are found in that great book.
Fantastic.
By the way, that's not one you'd often get. So
no, I was not expecting that answer, but it was a great answer. So definitely. Normally, I have to link the book in the description, but this time I don't think I need to do that. So
open your hotel room desk drawer.
Yeah, there'll always be one there. Share one internet resource that you use to increase your own productivity and stay in touch with current events.
I have a small network of thought partners. And there are people I go to and I say, hey, I got an idea. Tell me what's stupid. And Chris, it would be great to include you in that small group someday. But and what I love about these people is they're like my wife, who has the ability after 40 years to say, Dave, you're judging yourself by your intent, not how you came across. And I really love those small networks of thought partners who help me think about what I'm really trying to accomplish.
Okay, so it's like a mastermind group, is that right?
Absolutely. Great way to put it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what's one thing about your business that most excites you today?
What excites me today is what's tomorrow. I am so passionate about learning. Somebody, anyway, I won't tell a story. It's 30 seconds, but
go for it.
No, well, somebody said, "Oh, Dave Ulrich, he writes all those books, and they're not fresh." And I say, you got to read them. I do write a lot of books. I was an English major. I have hypergraphia. I write, and I'm consumed with putting ideas that have impact. But I change stuff. In fact, I'm working on a new presentation on the digital part of HR that I'm going to do in 3 weeks. And somebody said, well, how much have you done with that? Not much. I'm going to do it. I'm writing a new book on the organization of the future. I'm updating the leadership code. My passion is to completely disrupt myself. 25 to 20, about 20 to 25% every 2 years. That sounds easy. It's not. And that commitment to a growth mindset into learning and then to observing. I'm going to give the other comment that's not out there. I think everybody, the shiny new ball is gaga about big data and analytics. My friend Wayne Brockbank, he's one of those mastermind thought partners, says, Dave, 20% of the data in the world is in statistics. It's in spreadsheets. 80% of the data is observation. I just wrote a piece that I'm going to put out on LinkedIn in the next few weeks called Become a Leadership Anthropologist. Don't just rely on the big data. Get out and observe the world and see stuff that people don't see. Put yourself in a position where you're uncomfortable so that you see a world through observation and patterns and ideas that other people don't see. I think 80% of the data is not in spreadsheets. It's in observation and cleverly seeing a new world. And I hope I'm doing that as well.
Fantastic. That's amazing. And Dave, you've given us some great actionable advice, and I know that our members will definitely be better for it. So thank you for that. Give our listeners a parting piece of guidance, and then and also the best way that they can get in contact with you.
I'm going to do something before that, Chris. And the risk of taking time again, I admire.
No problem.
I'm going to admire you and I'm going to say to you. So if you, Chris, were to look out, and this is my anthropology in me, if you were to look out, you know thousands and hundreds of thousands of HR people. You listen to thought leaders. You live in this world. What's an issue that is looming out there? That's the grass that needs to be planted, and what do you sense that HR people might need to understand better so they can add even more value to their business? And I'm filling a minute while you think about that for another 10 seconds. What are the questions that we don't yet have good answers to? You've got 30 seconds. This is our speed teaching back to you.
Yeah. I think you've touched on it. I know you've just gone over it a second ago, but I do think the technology piece is huge, and it's something that's unavoidable. One of the things that keeps coming up over and over again is a trusted resource for HR leaders to become educated around technology. There isn't anything out there as a point of go-to. There's articles, thousands of articles all over the internet that they could read, but there's no real sort of, let's say, database, if there was a database of different HR solutions, the impacts that they're having, and real case studies that they could use to make better decisions around technology. That's one thing that doesn't actually exist at the moment,
Nice.
not that I know of. The other area, I think, is what you mentioned before, is looking at HR through the lens of the business and not internally, just within HR itself.
Nice.
So making sure that whatever you're doing within HR, it has to be directly aligned with the business's objectives. And that needs to be, and moving towards being more strategic. We've been doing that for years now, but I think still at the moment, HR still has a bigger role to play around the overall business strategy than it's currently doing at the moment. So those are the two things that I would say.
Thank you. You've taught me today, and I'm grateful for the podcast. I am learning in my continuous commitment to learning to get more on LinkedIn. So I encourage people to get me on LinkedIn if they choose that mechanism. I'm posting an article twice a month. I posted one. I'm posting all the time. Leadership Anthropologist will be the next one, and the other is we have a website, www.rbl.net. RBL is results-based-leadership.net. And then if people have a burning question, I am pretty accessible through email. It's my initials, dou@umich.edu. UMICH is University of Michigan, dou@umich.edu. And I hope that passionate HR people can really create that future by building on a wonderful past. I got to put in one other thing. We've now done 7 rounds of research over 30 years on HR competencies. One of the things I put together after we did the book Victory Through Organization, that's our last book on this, I started saying, so how has HR progressed in competence over 30 years? Because we do a study every 5 years. I was stupefied. On every single competence domain, we have moved up dramatically. For example, on knowing the business, the one that you talked about, the knowing strategy, it's gotten more elegant. We just used to say 30 years ago, know the business. Now we have this strategic position or skill set. HR professionals have moved up 1 full point from 3.2 to 4.2 as assessed by others. By the way, 1 point on a 5-point scale, that's just unheard of. And I am so confident that we've made incredible progress as HR professionals. We have more to go. I mean, we got to go from 4.2 to 4.6. But what an incredible progress we've made in business, HR expertise and technology, change, personal respect. The field is getting better. And it's wonderful with people, Chris, like you, who help make that happen.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for the kind words. Guys, make sure you head over to hrdleaders.com. There you'll find all the show notes on the episode. Dave's also been very kind enough to share some of his latest thinking and his research. So they will all be on there available to download straight after this episode. So you can go there now to take a look. Dave, again, thank you for sharing your journey with us. Really appreciate it. And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thanks, Chris.